Hi, everyone. Welcome to another Ashram Talk session. Last week, we celebrated our 100th class. Thank you, everyone who's been joining us. We'll also share a brief 2-minute anonymous listener survey in the comments today. So we would really appreciate if everyone could take a little bit of time to complete that. Today, we're going to explore a very important question. What if trying to control our life actually ended up leaving us less free? And how striving for pressure, outcomes, success can also kind of leave us feeling a little bit weakened, but a more present approach to life can really shape the way that we grow, the way that we learn, and that we connect with others. So, to join us in this topic today, we're very excited to be joined by Simon Haas. We haven't seen you here in a while, so welcome back. We're so excited to have you with us today.
Thank you, Sienna. I'm very excited and honored to be back.
Yeah.
I spent some months on pilgrimage in India. It was an extraordinary journey, and I'm back in Costa Rica and really looking forward to continuing with the study of the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
Today we are still in chapter 4, and we've moved to verse 14. But before beginning, in the age-old tradition of India, let's start with a Mangala Charanam, an auspicious invocation. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So I know that this particular invocation is one that a number of the speakers really appreciate deeply and recite at the beginning. So I thought it would be good to spend a little bit of time just looking at the meaning of this particular Mangala verse or auspicious invocation. So this is an invocation, this is a prayer to the teacher. And Namaha, as many of you will know, means homage or obeisances. And homage to whom? Homage to Sri Guru, the revered teacher. And this verse states that the revered teacher opens the eyes of one who is blinded by, so andhasya, of one who is blind. How? Agyana timira, by the darkness of agyana. So the darkness of lack of knowledge or the darkness of ignorance. Now, here's something that's very interesting, which many may not be aware of, because this verse also explains how the teacher does that. And that's in the second, the middle part of the verse, where it says, Jnananjana Shalakaya. So, Jnana is knowledge. Anjana is a medical salve. It's a type of ointment. And Shalakaya is an applicator. It's a stick that's used. You find this actually in Ayurveda. It's a particular type of applicator that's used to put ointment on the eyes and cure cataracts or cure various types of blindness. So in this particular verse, the teacher is being compared to a doctor, actually. It's medical imagery. And you'll see here that the word for eyes, chakshur, so chakshus, it's in chakshuhu is in the singular. So it's not referring to the physical eyes that we have, but it's referring to the eye of knowledge. And you find the eye of knowledge being mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita in a number of places. So we'll come to this eventually. Chapter 13, text 35, or chapter 15, text 10. It refers to chakshu, the eye of knowledge. And that eye of knowledge allows one to perceive the self. And that means the self with a small s, which is the individual self, and the self with a big S, meaning the Supreme Self, Sri Krishna. So the teacher is that person who opens the eye of knowledge so that we can have true perception. So it's a very beautiful verse, and it is a prayer to the teacher to open our eye of knowledge, so that what we're speaking about is not simply on the intellectual realm. It's not simply ideas that are like mental constructs, but rather what we speak and hear is guided by true perception. So let's move to the verse that we're exploring today. And so it's verse 14 of chapter 4. Now, before reciting the verse, previously, like a little summary, previously Krishna had explained that we cannot not act, not even for a moment. So that he explained in the previous chapter. So Krishna is suggesting skillful action. So that means action that's done without attachment to the results and is completed as an offering. So, namam karmani limpanti, name karma pale spriha, iti mam yo bhijanati, karma bhir na sabhadyate. There is no work that affects me, nor do I aspire for the fruits of action. One who understands this truth about me also does not become entangled in the fruitive reactions of work. So this is a beautiful verse. Namam karmani limpanti. Limpanti means, it refers to clinging, or so it's actions. Na means not, so actions don't cling or actions don't taint me, Krishna is saying. So the idea is that actions don't have any binding or contaminating effect on Krishna. And then name karma pale spriha. Spriha means desire or longing, and karma pale means in the results of action. So when Krishna acts, it's without any motivation tied to outcomes. Iti mam yo bijanati. One who truly understands this about Krishna, so not just intellectually, but insightfully grasping this divine mode of action. And then karma bhir na sabhadyate. Badhyate means, na badhyate means is not bound. So in other words, that person is not bound by actions. So this is the result. Freedom from karmic bondage. So I think it probably makes sense to first take a look at how action binds us. So there are different ways of explaining this. I want to try and explain it in a kind of a contemporary way that is easily understood, is easy to access. 95% of who we are by the age of 35 is memorized sets of behaviors. So our habits play an enormous part in defining who we are in this world. So what is a habit? A habit is something that we've done so many times that our body knows how to do it better than our mind. It's the result of what we do repeatedly, and we become bound. We even develop a particular desire nature. So that's one way in which actions bind us. The sacred texts of India explain whenever we act in a particular way, we introduce a seed of desire, and which will in time sprout. And so the actions that we have, they have a continuing effect in our life. It's not like we do something and we're immune then, but rather the actions that we take, they create the desire nature that we have, and they lead to further consequences and further actions. So I'm sure that those of you watching or listening have heard of the laws of karma. So the laws of how actions have consequences. When we cause suffering to others, we will have to, at some point, either in this life or another life, experience a similar suffering ourselves. So there's a network of action and consequences. One way to look at it also is to see it as contracts, sets of agreements or contracts. So we have a degree of freedom. It's a limited freedom, but we're acting within the confines or limitations of all the various contracts that we have entered into in this life and in many previous lifetimes. Those contracts that we've entered into, they create the limitations within which we work. So, for example, one type of limitation is the gunas, or the particular qualities that form our particular personality. And so you may have heard of sattva, rajas, and tamas, sometimes translated as goodness, passion, and ignorance. Tamas literally means darkness. So if we have a personality that's heavily influenced by tamas, then we tend to be very lethargic. We'll gravitate towards the use of various types of intoxicants, anything that allows us to escape life. We will tend to be destructive in our thoughts and behaviors towards others, but also towards ourselves. If, however, the dominant guna, the dominant quality that is influencing us is rajas, then we become very ambitious. We're filled with like 1,000 longings, and we work very hard to try and achieve these particular desires that we have. Someone in sattva, they are mostly satisfied with what they have, with who they are. They're much more interested in being. Actually, sattva sattva means beingness. Sat is to be, is related to being, and so it's the closest word in Sanskrit to mindfulness. Someone in sattva has a great deal of clarity. They're able to see through many of the illusions of life, but they're also bound. In sattva, someone is bound in that they prefer environments that are peaceful and pleasant. And if they're placed in an environment that's chaotic or difficult, they don't thrive in that, and they look for an escape. So we're bound by these different gunas. Guna also means rope. And so these gunas they bind us in various ways, and they are the results of all the little contracts that we've entered into in this life and in previous lifetimes. So Krishna is explaining here that there is a way of acting that does not bind us, but rather actually can help free us. And in this verse, he's explaining that that this is the way he acts, the way Krishna himself acts. Now, I should say, the attentive reader of the Bhagavad Gita at this stage will, of course, know that they'll know Krishna's divine identity as the soul of the universe, as Bhagavan, the source of all power. But it's clear from this particular verse, the context and the verse that follows, that Krishna is giving himself as an example. He's telling Arjuna to act in the same way that he himself acts. So the next verse, for example, verse 15, states that knowing this about Krishna, even seekers of liberation in ancient times performed action, but without desire. And Krishna tells Arjuna, therefore you too should act just as the ancients did before you. So Krishna is using himself as an example. Now, importantly, what Krishna is saying here is he's not saying just believe something about Krishna and you'll be free. Rather, it's deeper than that. Understand the principle embodied in Krishna's action, and then align your own action with it. That's what Krishna's teaching here. So I would like to explore this using 5 methods that are really practical, because I think the Gita is a practical text. It's meant for Arjuna to act in the middle of a battlefield. Kurukshetra is the field, represents the field of action. We are all on this particular field, and we cannot escape action. So it becomes a question of how we can act skillfully, how we can act in the best way. So let's quickly explore 5 ways in which we can do this. So one of them is reframing the cause of stress. So a starting point is to notice where our mind goes during action. So throughout the day, throughout our any day of the week, we can gently observe, am I focused on the action itself, or am I already living in the result? So typical signs of what the verse calls karma phala spriha, so desire for the results, when we're just clinging to the results. Typical signs of that are anxiety about outcomes. And we replay, what if it fails? Those kind of doubts, we replay them in our minds. And then we enter into a subtle bargaining. If I do this, I should get that. So the practice here is when you notice this, pause and reframe. We can say to ourselves, my role is the action, not the outcome. And importantly, this isn't passivity. So rather, it's clarity of responsibility. The verse is asking us to see desire clearly. And when we strongly want a result, it's best not to deny that, but we can prevent it from defining our action. So we might notice there's a desire for this particular outcome, but we can then make a decision. Having noticed that, we can make a decision, I'll act rightly regardless. And that immediately creates a space between us and the desire. So that's one way. And that entails being a little bit self-reflective, self-aware. What you can call metacognition. Being able to see the workings of our own mind. So in a way, it's a form of meditation that we do as we act throughout the day, and notice the degree to which we're clinging to something, and to watch that desire. We can't deny it out of existence if we do have a strong desire for an outcome, but just becoming aware of it allows us to act in a particular way that is the right way to act without, it creates a space between us and the desire we may have. The second method, and this is one I like to use very much in my own work, or whatever projects I'm working on, is what I'll call the offering shift. So this is something we do before the action. So before beginning any meaningful task, whether it's like writing, speaking, working, even a conversation, we can just take a few seconds, 5 or 10 seconds, and we can say to ourselves, let this action be an offering, not a transaction. Let this action be an offering, not a transaction. So in the language of the Gita, this aligns our action with Krishna's mode. So action is performed, but not for personal acquisition. So a couple of examples. Before sending an email, I can say to myself, may this be of service. But really mean that. So not just something that I just repeat in a rote fashion, but really from my heart. Sincerely, may this be of service. Before teaching, we can say, let this benefit whoever needs it. Before a difficult conversation, let me act with integrity and not control the result. So often this is really helpful in relationships as well, where expectations may run very deep. So we can try to create a shift. Instead of thinking, I need this person to respond in a certain way, We can practice, I will show up rightly regardless of response. And like this, our integrity is not dependent on others' reactions. So it's a very powerful way to act. So let's look at a third method. And this is practicing full effort, zero clinging. So I remember when I first came across these teachings on action in the Bhagavad Gita, I misunderstood, and I see also that many who are new to these teachings, they often misunderstand that non-attachment or non-clinging means reduced effort. But the verse actually implies the opposite. It's total engagement in action with zero dependence on outcome. So what we can do as an exercise is deliberately choose one activity, or you can pick more than one if you wish, but you pick an activity per day and do it with maximum care and attention. But then consciously release concern for the result. And then afterwards, it makes it possible to reflect on that action. Was the quality of that action higher? And often it is, just because the distraction of outcomes drops away. And I've seen this time and again in my own personal practice, that the quality of action is far superior. It's just not muddied, or you can even say contaminated by anxiety, the attempt to micromanage and to try and control situations and control people. It just creates a field of action where you allow everything to be. And unexpected things emerge, incredible things. You create a space for incredible things to emerge, unexpected results. And this leads to a fourth method, which I find this one particularly important as well, because sometimes the mind clings after the action. So, say for example, I don't know, say we're speaking in public, like public speaking or some event, or there's something we do. We can cling to that. We can cling to the result after the action. We can ask, we can be overcome by thoughts such as, did I do well? What did everyone think of me? What happens next? And then this is where the bondage often sneaks back in. So this particular practice is, after completing something, take a brief moment and acknowledge the action is done, the result is not mine. And you can even pair this with a physical cue. So it can be just as simple as breathing, just exhaling slowly. And just letting, with that while exhaling, just release not only your breath, but any clinging to the results of the action. Or you can even mentally place the results outside of yourself. Personally, I have as a bhakti yoga practitioner, I like to offer the results to Krishna. And I will often do that as in the form of a ritual. So like pick a beautiful flower. We have roses in the back garden, as well as other flowers. I choose a flower that symbolizes and embodies the particular action that has happened, and I offer it to the feet of Sri Krishna as an offering of devotion, and release myself of the results. Whatever the soul of the universe decides should happen with that, let that happen without myself clinging to the results or trying to control them. And that then leads me to a final method that you can use if you wish, which is simply redefining success and failure. So it's basically changing the metric by which we decide what is success and what is failure. So we tend to think of success: when I get what I want, that's success. And when I don't get what I want, that's failure. But we can shift that. So success means acting with clarity and non-attachment. In other words, success means skillful action, as Krishna describes it in the Gita and in this verse. And failure is acting from craving or fear and being clinging to the results and trying to control the environment. So this allows us, when we change the metric of what we consider successful or unsuccessful, it then allows us to reflect. We can do this at the end of the day. Where today did I act freely? And where was I subtly dependent on outcomes? And this builds awareness without self-condemnation. So this fifth one brings us back to the first one, which was, if you remember, all about metacognition, being aware. So this helps build that, actually, this particular exercise. So it supports the first exercise. So end of the day, well, even throughout the day. So in the morning, we can set our intention. Today, let my actions be wholehearted and unattached. Midday, we can check in. Am I acting or clinging? And then in the evening, we can reflect a little bit. Where was I free? Where was I bound? So for the bhakti practitioner, this way of acting is very important as well. This is important for any type of yoga. But for bhakti yoga, it's also relevant. There's actually a shift in identity that will take place for the bhakti yogi or the bhakti yogini from I am the enjoyer and controller of results to I am a participant in action, not the owner of outcomes. And this way of thinking loosens a very deep psychological knot. And even better, it leads to I am a servant of Sri Krishna, the soul of the universe, the soul of all souls. Let me offer this action and the results to Krishna. So we'll stop here. It's a beautiful verse, and the verses that follow are exceptional as well. And if you're watching this, I hope you will join us for the episodes that are just coming up now, in which we will enter into this topic even more deeply. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Simon. That was incredible. I'm imagining like your next book, like The Offering Shift. I feel like this is something that I would like to just listen to every day, or like just summarize this every day as I think about, going into whatever I'm doing for the day and reframing. But I can see how maybe we can apply this to spiritual life. But what if I'm thinking about like my daily life? Can I apply this to, like, for example, I work with students. Like if I'm emailing a student about this is how you register for your courses for the semester, like, can I offer that action and offer that as a service somehow?
Yes, definitely. So even someone who is not practicing bhakti yoga, even if they just wish to to be more effective in their everyday work, applying these principles will lead to them being more effective. So, there may be little things, chores that we have to do that well, there's a couple of things that will happen. First of all, we will become more attentive to our own state of mind as we operate in the world. So that becomes very useful, because being able to develop this metacognition, in other words, being able to see where we're operating from, allows us to shift, not just to try and make changes in the external world, but to shift to improve the quality of our very thoughts and actions. And so, for example, if we're working in education and say we're lecturing at the university, when we reach out to students, it will be with a different quality of consciousness than if we're trying to, if what we're doing is imbued with like a deep attachment to outcomes, and We begin to try and micromanage situations. We become very anxious as to whether, how we will be perceived, whether even, whether if we're giving a lecture, how many will turn up. We just approach our work with all of these anxieties related to the results.
Yeah,
But
like I think you mentioned, oh, sorry, no, continue, finish that thought.
being able to release ourselves from that creates just a freedom in what we do, and we are no longer our own identity is not tied to results that we don't actually ultimately have all that much control over. We can do our best. We can put all of our attention into what we're doing, but ultimately after that, we, by letting go and not clinging to the results, we're actually acknowledging that there is a dimension of life that is outside our control. And that's a very healthy thing to do. It's actually a practice of truth.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I agree. I think that's very important. And I mean, you mentioned kind of like unmuddying our actions. So essentially, it's like our actions are contaminated with, even if a subtle or not so subtle, personal motivations or attachment to the outcomes. And we can try to, relinquish some of that to, like you said, improve the quality of our actions. That's kind of like the gist, right?
That is, can
Sorry.
I mention one more thing,
Of
Sienna,
course.
related to that?
Please. Yes, please.
Just what you said reminded me of it. So there are quite a few different dimensions to this, but one of them is that we may not always be aware of it, but how we approach the state of mind with which we approach anything that we do, especially if it relates to other people, has a huge impact, a much greater impact than we may even know. And I think that we become more aware of that when we're on the other end. So someone is speaking to us. We know if someone's trying to control us or micromanage us or manipulate us or pressure us into doing something, as opposed to giving us some information and allowing us to make our own decisions and our own choices. So I've seen that, even in work such as, say, for example, being a salesperson, so someone who works in sales, they are far more effective when, rather than trying to control another person, they allow the other person the freedom to make their choice. And that's actually something quite interesting, because you see that in the Gita as well. After Krishna has explained 18 systems of yoga in the Bhagavad Gita, what does he do? He doesn't say to Arjuna, all right, now you must pick up your weapons and fight. He doesn't. This is one of the last verses, the last words of Krishna in the Gita. He says, have you heard everything that I've explained to you carefully? If you have, think about it and make your own decision.
Wow. Yeah, that's mind blowing. And yeah, I agree. The transaction cheapens our interaction so much, right? And really hurts our relationships. And I think it can be great, like you said, to kind of reflect on these things before we act so that, yeah, we can improve the quality of the actions, the interactions, the relationships. I think that that is such an important place to start thinking about our day and long term goals as well.
Right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. So Colleen, a few comments and I agree with all these comments. Colleen says, amazing class. Thank you, Simon. Love the practice of the offering shift. I agree. I'm loving the offering shift as well. And offering our actions to Krishna. Thank you so much, Colleen. And Carmen says, wow, this is my first time hearing you. It was mind blowing. Thanks so much for those words and spreading Krishna's word with such kindness. I agree with Carmen. Mind blowing was actually the word that I was thinking of. I was like, wow. Yeah. So, and it's amazing because this is, we're talking about the Gita, right? Like, all of this is so applicable. I feel like everyone is like, oh, wow, I need to apply this. And we're talking about the Gita and we're talking about the teachings of the Gita. So thank you for, highlighting that and yeah, just kind of bringing us right back to how we can apply this important wisdom every day, no matter where we are, in our spiritual practice, I think.
Thank you. Thank you, Colleen, and thank you, Carmen. For me, the opportunity to speak about these teachings of the Gita, it's a real privilege for me because it allows me to try and these are powerful reminders for me to continue trying to put this into action. And one thing about the teachings of the Gita that I think anyone who is a yoga practitioner and who tries to put them into action, the more the extent to which we begin practicing these teachings, the deeper our understanding of them becomes. And that is something that is quite incredible. In effect, Krishna becomes our teacher as we put his teachings into action. So that's quite exciting. There's the tradition of the Gita is a very mystical path, actually. We'll speak about that another time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we definitely will, because we are going to have Simon on with us frequently throughout the next few weeks. So come, you can listen to these talks live Thursdays at 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Mondays at 7:30. So we're going to be, giving some continuity to these topics. As you know, Simon, too, we also just launched this very brief 2-minute anonymous listener survey. So if
Great.
you like what you heard today and you want to hear more like that, maybe you're looking for philosophy here, or community, or just someone to talk to, or you have questions, whatever it may be, we really want to hear from you. So the survey is pinned in the comments. It's in the description to this channel as well. So please take a few minutes to fill that out, and we'd really appreciate it. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and we'll see you Thursday at 8 a.m. Thank you.